I want to start today with a specific feeling. It's a bit uncomfortable, maybe, because it feels like a failure, but I want you to picture being intimate with someone. You're physically as close as two people can get. But in your head, the story isn't about passion. It feels like a conversation.
Hmm.
A conversation where no one is allowed to say a single word.
That is a haunting way to start. The idea that silence can be louder than the physical act itself,
Mm-hmm.
it turns the bedroom into a very different kind of space.
Right. It's that feeling of trying to say something with your body because you were just terrified that if you use your mouth, the whole thing will dissolve. And that is exactly where we're pointing our spotlight today. We are doing a deep dive into this fascinating, and I have to say, somewhat devastating essay. It's called Sex as Emotional Negotiation by the writer and philosopher Pedro Malha.
It is a heavy hitter. We pull from a lot of sources on this show, but Mala's work, it hits a different frequency.
Mm.
He isn't looking at sex biologically, and he's not really looking at it romantically either. He's analyzing it almost like a marketplace.
A marketplace?
Yeah. A very quiet, very high-stakes marketplace where the currency is all emotion.
A marketplace implies trading.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our mission today. We need to figure out what exactly is being traded when the lights go out. Because Mala's central idea, and this is the part that, it kept me up last night, is that often sex is just a cover for a quieter bargaining.
Hmm.
We're circulating wants and fears and tolerances that are, as he puts it, too fragile to be named.
And that's the key phrase right there. Too fragile to be named. If we could name them, we'd just be having a discussion over coffee. We'd be setting boundaries.
Mm.
The fact that we're doing this in the dark, in the quiet, means we've entered a space where language feels too dangerous to use.
So let's get into the mechanics of it. When Malha uses the word negotiation, my brain immediately goes to, a boardroom. I picture suits, contracts.
Offers and counteroffers.
Exactly. I'll give you this if you give me that. But that feels way too cold and frankly too organized for what he's describing.
It is too cold, and it's far too explicit. In a boardroom, right, the terms are on the table. Everyone knows the deal. In Malha's negotiation, the terms are hidden. He argues it all happens through, well, things like tone, timing, persistence, hesitation, and compliance. It's entirely nonverbal.
So you're reading micro adjustments, a sigh, a pause.
A certain way they touch you. You're trying to figure out what is safe to ask for.
And more importantly, what isn't safe. You're constantly scanning for that electric fence.
Exactly. You learned very, very quickly. If I push for emotional clarity right now, the mood breaks. Or if I ask about tomorrow, they pull away. So what do? You negotiate by suppressing that need. You trade your silence just for the continuation of the encounter.
Wow. You're paying a tax on your own expression just to keep the connection alive.
It's a steep price. But let's talk about the currency. Malha breaks this down into some pairings that I found they're so accurate, they're almost painful to read. He says we aren't just trading bodies. We're trading things like attention for availability.
Okay, attention for availability.
That's a classic, especially now. Think about the logistics of it. One person makes themselves available, they clear their schedule, they drive over, they wait by the phone.
They provide the logistics.
And in exchange, the other person provides their focused attention for a few hours. The spotlight.
But that already feels unbalanced. Availability is like a constant state. Attention is a fleeting moment.
It often is. Another pairing he mentions is affection for reassurance. Or, and this one I think is the most profound, presence for belonging.
Presence for belonging. Let's sit with that for a second. Break that one down for me.
Okay, so imagine someone who feels untethered. Lonely, maybe, or just adrift in their life. They offer their physical presence, their body, their time, because being in that room, in that bed, makes them feel anchored. They get a sense of belonging, a temporary sense of home.
And the person they're with.
Well, they might be trading for something completely different.
And this is what Mala calls the illusion of balance, right? We both showed up, we're doing the same thing, so visually, it looks fair.
Visually, it's an even trade. 2 people, 1 bed. But emotionally, the exchange rates are wildly different. Mala points out that one person might be seeking, quote, closeness in the hope of continuity.
They're investing, they're betting on a future.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the other person could be seeking relief in the form of distraction.
They just want to get out of their own head for an hour, a break from the noise.
Precisely. And here's the kicker, and this is why the essay is so nuanced. Neither person is lying. This isn't necessarily about deception. Both people are acting in good faith based on their own needs. But the scales are tipped. The value of distraction is very different from the value of continuity. One is a consumable, the other is an investment.
It's like one person is paying in pennies and the other is paying in gold, but you've both agreed not to look at the receipt.
That is a perfect way to put it. Because no one looks, the transaction continues. Mala argues this negotiation actually starts way before anyone takes their clothes off.
Oh, this part made me wince because it felt so real to, the smartphone era. He talks about digital body language.
The pre-negotiation, the spacing of messages, how easily plans are changed or upheld. These are the opening moves. He writes about the relief or anxiety attached to waiting.
We have all been there, staring at the phone, watching those three dots appear and disappear, analyzing why it took 4 hours to get a "sounds good."
But think about what's actually happening in that moment. You aren't just being impatient. You're learning your place in the negotiation.
Mm.
If you're the one who's always waiting or the one always accommodating a last-minute text, you are establishing a pattern of concession.
A pattern of concession, so I'm essentially teaching them what I'll put up with.
You're teaching them the cost of access to you. And in this dynamic, you're setting the price very low. Malta says one person learns how much uncertainty they're expected to hold. If I want to see this person, I have to be okay with ambiguity. Meanwhile,
the other person learns how much distance they can maintain without losing access.
yes, it sounds brutal, like a mathematical formula for minimal effort.
It is a formula, an efficiency calculation.
And by the time you actually meet, the terms are set. The sex doesn't change the dynamic, it stabilizes it seals the deal for the night, it confirms that the contract is valid, I will treat you with distance, and you will still provide intimacy.
Okay, this begs the huge question, why? Why do we sign that contract? If I'm the one feeling all the anxiety, why do I agree to the trade? Is it just low self-esteem?
Malha takes a much more empathetic view. He doesn't think it's just weakness. He thinks it's about this deep human need to remain connected to something, even something precarious. We agree to these awful terms because we are terrified of loss.
So the silence is protective. We keep our mouths shut to keep the door open.
Silence is the glue holding the fragile thing together. There's this terrifying underlying belief that asking for more might collapse the entire arrangement. If I say, hey, what are we doing here? The worry is that the other person will just vanish.
So I trade my clarity for their presence. I'd rather be confused and with you than clear and alone.
You prioritize not losing them over understanding them. And this leads to this core concept of permission. Mala says we aren't just negotiating for sex. We're negotiating for permission. Permission to want. Permission to remain in their orbit.
Permission to imagine a future that they haven't actually promised.
That's the most dangerous part. Mala has this absolutely incredible line. The absence of refusal is mistaken for consent to hope.
I highlighted that one 3 times. Say it again.
The absence of refusal is mistaken for consent to hope.
It explains so many mixed signals.
It explains the confusion perfectly. You think, well, they didn't say no. They keep coming back. They're sleeping with me. That must mean there's a chance. You treat their presence as evidence of a future. But Mala warns us, in this type of negotiation, permissions are inferred. They're never granted.
So you're building a house on a foundation that hasn't even been poured.
You are. And that has to take a toll. You can't just keep suppressing your needs forever without it showing up on the bill.
The emotional ledger.
Exactly, the emotional ledger. Mala calls it a cumulative cost. Every time you swallow a question, every time you accommodate a bad schedule, it's a small entry, that ledger. But over 6 months, a year, that ledger is deep in the red.
And usually only one person is holding all the debt. The other person is operating debt-free.
Correct. One person is doing all the adjusting, the interpreting, the waiting. This imbalance creates what Mala calls quiet grief.
Quiet grief. I found that term so specific. It's not the same as a breakup, is it?
No, and that's why it's so isolating. If you break up, your friends bring you ice cream, it's a public event, there's a ritual. But quiet grief is mourning a possibility that never actually happened. You're mourning the version of the relationship that lived inside your head.
And you can't really explain it. People will just say, well, you knew it was casual. Why are you upset?
Society invalidates the pain because the contract wasn't official. But the grief is real because your investment was real. And Malha points out this leads to a paradox. Sex is supposed to be the ultimate intimacy, but in this context, it feels both intimate and distant at the same time.
Like being physically exposed but emotionally armored.
He says it's intimate because of proximity, but distant because the deeper questions remain untouched. In fact, there's a mutual agreement not to touch them. So the physical closeness actually sharpens the sense of what's missing.
You're lying next to someone skin to skin and you've never felt further away.
It's a strange experience. And a lot of people use the sex itself to avoid those questions. It's a delay tactic.
Right. If we're still sleeping together, I don't have to ask where this is going yet.
Maha calls it postponement. Each meeting resets the clock. It buys you another week of hope. It's a way to hit the snooze button on the reality check.
Now, I want to push back here a little, because listening to this, it's so easy to paint a villain. You know, the emotionally unavailable person taking advantage of the nice person. But Malha doesn't really let us do that, does he?
No, he's very careful to dismantle that bad guy myth.
Hmm.
It's rarely a predator-prey dynamic. Malha argues that people enter these negotiations because human connection is messy. Desire and fear are tangled up together for everyone involved.
So the person maintaining the distance isn't necessarily trying to be cruel.
They might be terrified of being engulfed. They might be protecting their own autonomy just as fiercely as the other person is seeking connection. Malha suggests it's often a misalignment, not a malicious attack.
But even without a villain, damage is being done. He talks about self-reduction. That just sounded so painful.
It is. Self-reduction is what happens when you edit yourself to stay chosen. You silence a part of your personality here, you ignore a boundary there, you make yourself smaller and smaller and smaller to fit into the tiny space the other person has left for you.
You're trying to be low maintenance, but in doing so, you become a ghost of yourself.
You become low resolution. And that brings us to Malha's metaphor of sex as a mirror.
Yeah, explain that. We usually think of sex as a resolution. Like, if the chemistry is good, the relationship must be good.
We want sex to be the fix. But Malha says it just reflects the negotiation back at us. If the dynamic is unbalanced at dinner, it will be unbalanced in bed. It just makes the trade visible. It shows you exactly what you are worth to them and what you are accepting.
And yet, and this is the really confusing part, it can still feel good.
That's the complexity of pleasure. If it was just miserable, you'd leave. The trap is that you can experience genuine joy, genuine chemistry within a dynamic that is slowly diminishing you.
He writes, to feel pleasure in something that is also diminishing. That contradiction is what keeps people stuck for years.
It anchors you in the confusion. You think, how can this be bad for me if it feels this good? It resists easy categorization. It's not a clear mistake, and it's not a clear success. It's this murky middle ground where you get just enough to stay.
But never enough to be satisfied.
Exactly. And eventually, that has to end. Malha wraps up by talking about what's left over when these things finally dissolve. He calls it residue.
Residue is the perfect word, because these things rarely end with a clean break. They just sort of fade out. The texts stop, the plans stop, but they leave a mark.
And that residue, it's a sense of having participated in something real but incomplete. You were present, but you weren't fully met. And you can't even really be angry because technically nobody broke a promise.
No promise was ever made.
It's like a ghost of a relationship. You're haunted by something that didn't quite exist. And that ghost, that can haunt the next one. The residue informs how you approach the next person.
This is a tough one to sit with. It really forces you to look at your own history, and I think everyone has at least one dynamic where they traded away their voice just to keep someone in the room.
And conversely, where we've allowed someone to silence themselves for us, it works both ways. We've all been the person who just needed distraction and accepted someone's presence without asking what it cost them. Recognizing the trade is uncomfortable, but it's the only way to stop making it.
It changes how you view all those casual connections. It's not just fun. It's about what is being bargained for in the dark.
It's the economy of the heart. And realizing you're in a negotiation is the first step to asking for better terms. Or maybe just realizing the price is too high and walking away from the table.
We're out of time, but I want to leave you with a final thought, directly from Pedro Malha's work. It's a question for all of us. If you are currently in a silence, asking for permission to hope, take a second. Ask yourself, what are you trading away to keep that silence intact?
And is it worth what you're getting in return?
That's the question. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Take care.